be able to go here and download the correct one for your system. And you can use other IDEs as well, but the setup will be a little bit different. We're using Intellij because it's more convenient than some of the other IDEs when it comes to setting up Selenium. Next, we're going to be working with Chrome today, Chrome driver. Like I mentioned earlier, Selenium WebDriver works with multiple um, internet web browsers. However, I'm using Chrome today for ease of use. If you do not already have Google Chrome installed, please go to this link and download Google Chrome. Next, if you have Google Chrome installed, click on the three dots at the very top right, and this will bring down the drop-down menu. Move over to Help, and then click on About Google Chrome. When you click on About Google Chrome, you'll be taken to this page right here, and you can check specifically which version of Google Chrome you have. Once you've confirmed which version of Google Chrome you have, go to the next link in the slide for Chrome driver, selenium.org/downloads, and download the corresponding Chrome driver for your version of Google Chrome. One thing to note here, when you do download Chrome driver, make sure to move it or place it in that's going to be easy to find later on, because you will need to move it from there into your project in a few steps forward. If you do not already have Intellij, it's going to take a second to download and things like that. For sake of time, I will move along with the project setup. Again, I've shared the slides, so if anyone wants to follow through later on, who's going to take time to download and set up everything, you can go along with the slides later on and follow through again. But moving on with project setup in Intellij, when you first open Intellij, you will be brought to a screen similar to this. When you get to the screen, click on Create New Project. After you click on Create New Project, you're going to be taken to a screen like this. Now, make sure on the left-hand side, you have selected Maven project specifically. And as I mentioned earlier, make sure you have Java 11 installed. At the top, make sure it says Project SDK 11. It should say Java version 11, etc. Once you've done that, click Next, and you'll be taken to this page, which is simply naming your workshop and setting a location where, naming your project, excuse me, and setting a location where you want the project to be saved. Once you've named the workshop and set a save location, click Finish, and your project will be created. Once your project is created, there are a few extra steps you're going to want to take before you can get into the coding aspect of using Selenium WebDriver. At the very top left-hand corner of Intellij, click on File, and then click on Project Structure. When you click on Project Structure, you're going to be taken to a similar page like this. Click on Modules at the top left-hand side. When you click on Modules, click on Sources, and make sure the language level is set to 11. By default, sometimes it is set to 5, other times it is set to 8. Make sure you click on this drop-down menu and set it to 11. Once you have done that, go back into the project structure right here. Again, when you set the language level to 11, then you can set it to 11 and you click apply or click OK, and then again click at the top left hand side of top left corner on file and project structure again, and click on libraries. When you click on libraries, you're going to be taken to something similar to this. It's going to look something like this. You're going to have a plus and a minus. Click on plus, and then click from Maven. When you click from Maven, you're going to want to add the following two libraries. to your project. The first one, you click plus, click from Maven, and then in this bar right here, you type in JUnit colon JUnit colon 4.12. Sometimes it adds a space, so make sure there's no extra spaces or anything because it will not be able to read it correctly. Again, the first one is JUnit colon JUnit colon 4.12. When you've typed that in, click OK. You click OK, repeat it again for Selenium. So that one's a little bit longer. I recommend opening the slides that I've shared in the chat and just copy and pasting that into here. So again, project structure, file at the top left corner, then project structure, libraries, click on the plus, click from Maven, and then paste the JUnit library, click OK, then click plus again, from Maven again, paste the Selenium library, and then click OK. Once you've added both libraries, you want to confirm your additions. So, for example, when you add the JUnit library, it's going to ask you that you want to add the JUnit library, and you click OK. Then it's going to ask you again for the Selenium library as well. Are you sure you want to add the Selenium library? Click OK as well. And then you're going to want to do a final confirmation of all of your added libraries, which is right here. When you confirm that you want to add those two libraries, they're going to appear right here. And when they appear, first you click on Apply, and then you click OK. And that's going to import all of the libraries into your project officially. Once you've done that, the next step is adding Chrome driver to your project. As I mentioned earlier, you want to save Chrome driver to an area or a location that you can find easily. And I mentioned that you will have to find it and drag it into your project later on, and this is that step. Locate where you've saved Chrome driver, and then all you have to do, you don't have to do anything crazy. Just drag and drop it into your project in Selenium. So if you want to like sort of open up both windows and then just drag and drop it into your project, and you'll see it appear in your project chromedriver.exe. You'll see it appear within your project in Intellij. You don't have to do anything else for that. It's a one-step process. Next is the POM file setup. You want to click this link in the slides. It is a GitHub repo that I made for the specific POM file requirements for this workshop. Click on that link and copy everything from dependency all the way down to build, the closing tag for build, basically everything within the repo. Copy everything and paste it within the POM file. So the POM file is in your project. If you look down right here, it'll say pom.xml. Click on that, open it, copy all of the things, copy everything from the repo, and paste it into that POM file before the closing tag for project. Sometimes some people might make a mistake where they'll paste it after this closing tag and it's not going to work correctly. Make sure it is pasted before the closing tag for project. Once you've done that, you should be set up to start working with Selenium WebDriver. You should have everything set up. Next, we're going to go over creating the test class. Again, Selenium WebDriver is for testing a website. And in order to test a website, you have to create a test class, which is very similar and is pretty much the same thing as creating a regular class. So within your project, open your project in Intellij, click the arrow so it opens up, then open source, and you'll see two folders. Ideally, you'll see two folders, main and test. Open the test folder, and you will see a folder called Java. It's a little bit blocked out here, but it will say Java right here. Right-click on the Java folder, and click New and Java class. When you click on New and Java class, you'll be taken to this little pop-up window will appear where you will name your Java class, and then you'll confirm that it is a class. There's a bunch of different options. Make sure class is selected, and you name it whatever you want, Selenium tester, or however you want to name your class. Once you do that, hit enter, and a new class will be created. That'll be your tester class, and that's what we're going to be using for this workshop. Next, we want to go over creating the test method. So when you first create your test class, it's basically going to be a blank Java class. There's going to be nothing in it. And in order to do testing, we want to create a test method. The test method is created very similar to a regular method. Everything's pretty much the same for the most part. The only difference is this right here is placed before @test. When you put @test before a method, it is going to turn it into a test method. You want to set it to, you can set it to private or public. For ease of use, just put it on public. Set the return type to void, and then name your method whatever you want to. Ideally, when you're creating test methods, you name it with, with the keyword test. It doesn't have to be, but it's just easier to remember and easier to recognize as a test method. So I put it as, I name my method test website. It should not have any arguments, and moving on. The first thing you want to do once your method is created is set up the driver. In order to set up the driver, first you want to create an object. You want to create a WebDriver object. The WebDriver, that's the type, and you can name it whatever you want. Driver, WebDriver, WDriver, whatever. I just named it driver to make it easy. Once you've created the WebDriver object, you want to set your system property. So system dot set property, and then inside this will have two arguments. First, in double quotes, you'll have WebDriver dot Chrome dot driver, all lowercase. Again, WebDriver dot Chrome dot driver, end quote, comma, double quotes, and then you're going to put your Chrome driver right here, Chrome driver.exe. If you've named your Chrome driver something else, or if it's named something else by default somehow, make sure you name it correctly to what your Chrome driver is named. Once you've done that, then you're going to set the driver that you've created, set that to a new Chrome driver. You can also do this in one step, but this is just kind of how I learned it, and that's just kind of how I've been doing it. Create the driver object, set the property, and then you assign the driver to a new Chrome driver. Now it's time to actually get into the coding portion of Selenium web testing, Selenium WebDriver testing. The first thing you're going to want to do is fetch a web page. So the way to do that, now the way that we're going to be using WebDriver is we're going to pick a website that we want to test. We're going to know exactly where we want to end up on that web page. And then we're just going to use Selenium to navigate through that to end up, or we're going to use Selenium to go through the website and end up where we want to end up. So the first thing you want to do is to be able to get the link for that website. I'm using google.com because it's generic, it's easy. So assign the link for the website to a string variable. So a string, you can name it whatever you want. Again, it doesn't have to be capital either. It can be lowercase. Ideally, it should be lowercase actually. Equals, and then in quotations, put the link of the website in quotations. And then on the next line, put driver. That's the driver object that you created. Driver.get, and then the string for your link. You can also, if you don't want to save the link in a string, you can also just put driver.get and in quotes put the link of the website right here. It's up to you, but preferably you want to put the link, you want to save it or assign it to a string variable so you can use it later if you ever need for any other reasons. Once you've fetched the website, then the next thing you want to do is to be able to work with the website. Now, understand that when you fetch the website right here, if you were to run this, for example, if you were to run this method, driver.get, the link of the website, it'll open a new window and it'll actually go to that website. Once you're there, you want to be able to work with the elements on the website. The first thing you want to do is use inspect element. I'm pretty sure everybody, if not most people, hopefully, are familiar with inspect element or have at least seen it or seen something like it before. So inspect element lets you kind of see the HTML of a web page and it lets you see all the tags and things of that sort. And the way you are able to see that, the way you're able to use inspect element is if you can click anywhere on the page, just right click anywhere on the page and this little thing will come up and you can just click inspect. But a better thing to do actually, if you want to interact with specific elements on the page, you can actually right click on a specific element. So for example, if I right click on the search bar or if I right click on images right here or something and then I inspect, it'll actually open up the inspect element menu right here, but it'll highlight that specific element that I right clicked on. That's a nice little thing. If you want to work with specific elements, you already know exactly what element you want to work with. Just right click that element and then inspect element from there. When you inspect element, as you see right here is a whole bunch of code, but if you right click a specific element like I mentioned and it's highlighted, there's a few things you look for in the HTML code. Specifically, you look for name. What is the name of the specific element that you're working with? Sometimes some websites will have an ID for the element. So they'll either have an ID or a name. And if they do, then you can actually use something called find element. Find element is how you're going to get Selenium to work with the elements on that web page, on that website. And you can use find element with name or ID if they're available, but sometimes they're not available. You're not going to see a name for an element. You're not going to see an ID. And what you want to do in that situation is you're going to want to right click on it. And when you right click on this right here, you're going to have this menu pop up. And you move over to copy. And what you'll notice when you move over to copy is you have all of these right here. Copy outer HTML, copy selector, JS path, styles, and XPath, full XPath. For the sake of this workshop, we're going to be working with name, ID, if available. And if those are not available, we're going to be using XPath. Because after name and ID, the easiest one to work with, or the more specific one to work with, the easier one to work with is XPath. And the way you work with it is you make a web element object. You make a web element object, you name it whatever you want. So for example, if I'm working with a search bar element on the page, I right click on the search bar, I'm working with that. You want to name it something similar to it. So I named it query. And the way you use that element in your Selenium is driver dot find element, and then in parentheses you put by dot, and when you put by dot, you will see you have a list of things you can choose from: name, ID, CSS selector, XPath, etc., etc. Like I mentioned, if name is available, just use name because it's easy and you can remember it, and they're usually very straightforward. If the name is not available, again, use XPath. Next thing, once you've found the element you want to work with, especially if it's a search bar, like google.com, for example, you want to work with a search bar, you want to be able to type into the text box. You want to type into a text box, you want to type into a search bar, again, same thing. The way you do that is the object that you've made. So I made my web element object and I named it query. All you have to do is just type in query dot send keys, and in parentheses put a double quote and type whatever you want to be typed into that text box. So if I want to Google search Wikipedia, for example, I would put query dot send keys double quotes Wikipedia, and that will actually type Wikipedia into the Google search bar for me. Next thing, once you type something into a search bar on Google, the easiest thing, the most intuitive thing to do is to hit the enter key, right? You type something, you hit enter, bam, your search results come up. But what if you could do that without having to actually click anything? Again, Selenium. So when you type Wikipedia, and you send keys right here, you would go back to that same object, query, and you click query, or you type query dot submit. Submit is basically just like hitting the enter key. There are certain elements on a web page or on certain web pages whose type is submit. They have a submit type, such as this little magnifying glass or the Google search button and so on and so forth. The whole point of these buttons pretty much is so that when you hit enter, they work to submit your request and move to the next page or do whatever they're supposed to do. So query dot submit. So you send keys into the search bar and then you submit, and it'll go from this page. Submit will basically click this button, click the search button, and it'll go to the next page, which is all your search results for Wikipedia. Next, once your search results have come up, you're obviously going to want to click something. You're not going to just sit there on the search results page for nothing. And this is where clicking becomes necessary. The syntax for clicking a button is again, you make another web element object, name it whatever you want. I named it images because I'm going to be clicking on the images button or clicking on the images link. The web element images, and then set it to driver dot find element by. Now again, I mentioned if name or ID is not available, next easiest thing to go with is Xpath. So you right click on the images button, and inspect element, again, do the whole thing, and you go to the copy menu, and it'll say copy by XPath or copy XPath. Just click copy XPath, and then over here, type find element by dot XPath, and in quotations, just paste that XPath. You're not going to understand what any of this means. It doesn't matter. That's fine. Just paste it. When you do that, once you've set that as the web element, you're going to set images dot click. You set the element to this specific button right here, or this link, or whatever you want to call it. And then once you set it to that, you just click on that element. You set your element, and then you click on the element. Click it can work for links, it can work for images, it can work for checkboxes. It can also work for, if you use XPath, it can work for checkboxes, and it can also work for radio buttons. I know there's several ways to work with radio buttons in Selenium, and also checkboxes. There's probably more than one way, but the easiest way, if you work with XPath, you find element by XPath, you can click on text checkboxes, you can click specific radio buttons, and so on and so forth. So links, buttons in general, radio buttons, checkboxes, images, everything can be done with finding element by XPath and then just using dot click. Radio buttons, again, same thing. Find element by XPath and click. Find element by, well, yeah. Find element by XPath and click. Next, we're going to talk about selecting a drop-down value, or selecting a value from a drop-down menu. This is a little bit different than clicking a button or a link or an image or a checkbox. When you're selecting a drop-down value, you're going to have to use the keyword select. You're going to be using a select object. Because what you want to do with a drop-down menu is you want to select the menu first, and then you want to pick something out of that menu. When you're working with things like checkboxes and so on, all you have to do is just click on the box. Whereas with a drop-down menu, you have to select the menu and then pick something out of it. So you start with the select keyword, right? This is going to be, you're going to make a select object. Select and then major. Um, we're not working with google.com anymore. This is just general examples. But if you're on a page that asked you to choose your major area of study, for example, and there was a drop-down menu, for different concentrations of study, so you would put select, major, whatever you want to name that keyword, or whatever you want to name that variable, and then new, because you're making a new object, new select, and then in parentheses for that select, you put your driver.findElement by Xpath. And the Xpath is you're going to be grabbing the Xpath of the drop-down menu itself. So right click on the drop-down menu, and then copy the Xpath and paste it into here. Again, select, major, new, select, driver.findElement by Xpath. Once you've selected the drop-down menu, there's different ways you can select a value from the drop-down menu. However, the easiest one is something called select by visible text. Select by visible text lets you basically, you don't have to get an XPath. XPath is already chosen for the menu, but you don't have to find an ID or anything like that. You would just click on the drop-down menu and just like whichever option you want to pick, you would actually just type that in here. So if an option is software, for example, I could just type major dot select by visible text and in quotation marks put software, and that's all I have to do. I don't have to get no funky keywords, no IDs or anything like that. Just straight up software or whatever value you want from the drop-down menu. Now, one special thing I want to go over is something called timeout. So we've gone over things like we've gone over typing into a text box. We've gone over clicking buttons. We've gone over selecting values from a drop-down menu and so on and so forth. But one thing you want to be careful about, especially with Selenium, is that once you run your Selenium WebDriver, once you run the test, it happens so fast that sometimes the WebDriver is going to start moving before a page can actually load. And it's going to start trying things before a page can actually load, and it's going to end up failing or crashing. So what you want to do to combat that is something called timeout. And the way you do that is very simple. And you take your driver dot manage dot timeouts dot implicitly wait, and then you set your time. So it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, however long you want to set it, and then you set your time unit. For ease, we're going to put time unit seconds. And you usually want to do this anytime you click on something. When you use click or anything like that, you usually want to use a timeout so you don't end up working faster than the page can load. And lastly, the final test, make sure everything went smoothly. Once you've clicked on a bunch of things and you've set a bunch of values and you've done all sorts of stuff, right? You want to make sure you've reached your final destination pretty much. And the way you do that is something called assert. Assert will let you know if the value you're looking for, if you retrieve the value that you're looking for, right? And for this one is basically we're going to make sure that you've gotten to the final page that you're trying to get to. And to do that is quite simple. You use the keyword assert. You say assert dot assert true. Assert true means, again, assert that a certain thing, whatever you put in here, is obviously true. Driver dot get page source dot contains and then you type some text in here. What this is basically saying is you are checking to make sure that the page that you've gotten, that you're on, you're checking the source of that page to see if the page contains specific text, right? So for example, if I were to just Google search Wikipedia and I clicked on the link for wikipedia.com, I would check if the page contains some text, or if I've gotten to a page that contains some text that I'm sure is specific to wikipedia.com, right? So if I just get to a Google results page, like a search results page, I know for sure that at the bottom of that search results page, there's going to be a text that says people also searched for XYZ. So to make sure I've gotten to a search results page, I say assert true dot driver dot get page source dot contains people also search for. If I've gotten to the correct page, then when I run this method and it goes through all of that and it gets me to the search page, I will see something pop up on my screen that'll say test passed. And if I haven't gotten to the correct page, then it's going to say test failed. So, a conclusion and a quick summary. Selenium WebDriver, Selenium in general, is a great way to test a website. And there's many things you can do with it. The more simple ones are you can fetch a web page, you can find elements by using inspect element, and then you can use the element's name, ID, selector, XPath, etc. You can work with elements using send keys, submit, and the click methods. And then you can select values from a drop-down list using the select method. Select by visible text and select by other methods. You can use timeout to wait before making the next move so that you don't move faster than the page can load. And finally, you use assert methods to confirm that you've navigated to the correct page and you verify that your test was successful or failed. Finally, I have a challenge here. I know I'm running a little bit short on time. Well, we have about 22 minutes. So I want everybody to, if you haven't already at this point, open the slides link that I posted in the chat, go to this challenge slide, and click on this website. Click on this link. It's a little website that I made to be able to test or to do Selenium web testing. It just contains all the stuff that we've talked about here. Send keys, click, checkbox, radio buttons, everything. It's one little small page that contains all that stuff. And it has a little thing on the next page or the results page that you can use to assert. So just to quickly go over the page so you probably don't have to. So when you click on it, it's a little quote unquote web-based test. So if you see here, you'll see it says welcome to the web-based test. You type in your name, type in your email, choose your major area of study, in digital media, software, security, business, other. These are 100% accurate to everybody that's going to be in here. So if something here doesn't really apply to you or you don't know the answer, just type or click something. It doesn't matter. And there's going to be 4 basic questions with radio buttons, right? There's 4 questions with radio button answers. And then at the bottom right here, there's a little checkbox. And below the checkbox, there's a little button right here that says submit test. I want everybody, so I'm just going to demo the website without Selenium. I'm going to demo it to show what it looks like. So area of study, right? If I just click something, click another thing, click, click, and then you click the button right there. I'm not going to show the correct answer as well. Doesn't matter, right? I just want to make sure that Selenium works correctly. You click submit test. When you do that, it's going to reload the page, and it's also going to give you this right here at the bottom, right? So now I want everybody, I want everyone in the audience basically. Click on that link and then try to use Selenium WebDriver to do this whole thing. So use Selenium WebDriver to go to this page, type in your name, type in your email, choose your major area of study, answer these 4 questions, click the checkbox, and hit submit test. And I'll give you a few hints here, because I don't want to take up everybody's time. I don't want y'all to be sitting here working for 2-3 hours on this. For these radio buttons, do use the Xpath. So if I right click this and I go right here, you see when I hover over the specific inspect element piece for that element, right? So if I hover over this line right here, you'll see it's highlighting the radio button on the left, and if I move over this line, it's highlighting the next radio button and the next radio button and so on, right? If I right click if I right click on the line and I click copy and copy XPath, that's the best way to work, or the easiest way to work with radio buttons. The reason is because with radio buttons, for a set of radio buttons, like there's 4 right here for one question, a set of radio buttons are all going to have the same name and a different value. And while you can work with that in different ways, you can use the same name and just pick your value. It does get a little bit confusing at times. But if you work with XPath, each radio button has a different XPath. So when you're working with the radio buttons, number 1, use XPath. And then again, XPath, and then use the click method. For the checkbox, same thing, XPath and click. For submit test, also XPath and click. I know it says submit test. It's not, it doesn't work with submit. It's not a submit button. Just use click for that one in the same way, XPath and submit. So send keys, and so on. Do that up until, and then use select for this one by visible text. And then the last piece for assert, after you submit test, wait for the whole thing to load. When you click submit test, wait for it to load, and then assert that you've completed the test by looking for the following text, right? So your test results. You should just basically any of these lines right here, because these lines are going to be specific to the results page, and that's how you're going to know you've ended up at the correct page. So I want everyone to give that one a try. I will keep this page up right here because it does have a sort of little cheat sheet you can reference back to, or if you have the slides open, you can also do that as well. But I'm gonna keep this little cheat sheet open. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If anyone has any questions or comments, you're free to ask or comment as well. But please do attempt to work on this. Hopefully, it shouldn't take too long. If we end up hitting 11 o'clock, you're still free to work on it. And yeah, if anyone has any questions or comments, that's pretty much it.